In the past 8 elections, Republicans have won the popular vote 1 time, and it led to the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression, a lie about weapons of mass destruction that led to 1 million civilian deaths, and what I believe to still be the funniest interview of all time.
Now watch this drive.
Bush won the popular vote 1 time, and yet there have been 3 Republican terms in the past 8 elections. He lost by 500K in 2000, and Trump lost, shut up, by 2.8 million in 2016, yet both still became president because the popular vote doesn't matter as much as electoral college votes. Every state is given 3 votes automatically, including the District of Columbia because of the 23rd Amendment, so 3 times 51 is 153, and the other 385 votes are distributed according to population by the most recent census. What this results in is voters in small states having more power in the Electoral College than big states, because in Vermont there are 647,000 people, and Vermont gets 3 votes. Which means for every vote, there are 216,000 people that are represented. But in California, there are 39.1 million people, and California gets 54 votes. Which means for every vote for president, there are 724,000 people, so all that math means that a vote in Vermont is worth more than 3 times a vote in California. For reference, here's a map. In these states, a vote is worth less than a vote from these states. In this system, it's theoretically possible, if it's a 2-candidate race, to win the bare majority of the popular vote in the states that have the lowest ratio of population to electoral college vote, and still achieve 270 electoral college votes with only 23% of the popular vote. Sounds bad, right? Well, when the Constitution was being drafted, the Founding Fathers were stuck between having Congress vote to determine president or a straight popular election. Some didn't want Congress to hold that power over the executive branch, and some didn't want all the people to vote when their news relied on who's got the fastest horse. So they compromised on having electors in the middle between the people and Congress, and these electors vote based on who their district voted for. Most of the time. It's called being a faithless elector when an elector sees how their district voted and goes against that data, but this has been banned in 33 states and hasn't had any tangible effect in a modern election. But I think there should be some kind of protection against an elector seeing how their district voted and being able to pick literally anybody they want. Like in 2016, there were 7 faithless electors. It didn't matter in the end, but 2 Texas electors decided to choose Libertarian Ron Paul and John I have a friend who's gay Kasich. And so, we're left with this confusing, rigged way of electing our commander-in-chief, which allowed Hillary to blow a 3 million vote lead to Trump in 2016, and now we have to bear witness to the consequences. There's a lot of headlines about immigrants being able to vote since Elon had the employees at Twitter boost his account engagement because he got angry Joe Biden had a more popular tweet than him, so he thinks everyone else should believe that Democrats are flying in Venezuelans on private jets, busing them to voting stations where the only option is Kamala Harris, then sending them out to replace straight white men in their own homes. And buy them Porsches. As far as conspiracies go, it ends with this simple fact. In federal elections, for the president, it is illegal to vote if you're a non-citizen. You must be a legal US citizen to vote for the president. So if you crossed the border a week ago without signing a single thing, you can't vote. Not only that, Bill Clinton made it so you'll go to fucking jail if you try to. Where it gets complicated is when you break it down to state and local elections, where in some states non-citizens can't vote in either, in some they can vote in local elections only, and in some it's legal to vote in both. Non-citizens in some places are on the same level as, for some reason, those that live in territories of the US, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa. You can't vote from there, but if you're an American living abroad, you can mail in a ballot, so long as you keep paying income taxes to the US government while working wherever you are. Isn't it messed up you can live all the way in Beirut and the bombs Israel is dropping on you are paid with your tax dollars? Let's be reminded that under the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, slavery and indentured servitude were made illegal unless you go to jail. Under federal law, people don't have the right to compensation when they work in jail, and if they're lucky enough to be in a state that has laws protecting prison labor, on average, a prisoner makes from 10 to 65 cents an hour. To add to that, their voting rights are taken from them while incarcerated and most times even after they're released. There have also been numerous studies conducted on how being a prisoner is very detrimental to one's mental health and how restricting one's physical freedom is something that most people glaze over and don't think to themselves, should we really spend $31,000 per year on someone who drove through Texas with a joint in their glove box? Do people that jump the turnstile to the New York subway deserve to have their basic human rights taken away? I would say the solution isn't to shoot at them and hit 4 bystanders instead. Being a prisoner in America is pretty much becoming a second-class citizen, and private prisons want it to stay that way. They back Republican legislators, including one such Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who is interviewing the Justice Department Inspector General about contraband in federal prisons.
I think like maybe the most dangerous kind of contraband in prisons is cell phones. Cell phones aren't going to kill anyone themselves, but they enable the commission of many other heinous crimes in prison. That's one reason why I've introduced the Cell Phone Jamming Reform Act, which would make it clear to state prisons that they can use targeted jamming to block cell phone signals in prison housing units.
We obviously cannot give prisoners cell phones as to give them access to their loved ones while they waste away in our closet with a window, and there's been much debate on prisoner rights from the left, and I would like to offer a middle ground. We in Arkansas already don't let our prisoners vote, and we also don't pay them for their labor, God forbid, so I think a reasonable course of action is to take away some of their abilities, physical abilities, I mean. What I mean is, when a prisoner first enters a jail, we, starve them for as long as necessary. Let's say you got a prisoner, they're about 150 pounds. You starve them as much as possible, down to just skin and bones. You can see the outlines of their intestines. And after that, they get to about 115 pounds. What you do next is saw off their appendages, mostly the hands and feet, and do it inch by inch so as not to weaken them to the point where they cannot perform the state-required 70 hours a week of manual labor. You do this until this 150-pound prisoner has reached 90 pounds, therefore reaching the 3/5 compromise. That's the name of the law that I'm hoping will be passed through Congress with bipartisan support.
おかえりなさいませ、ご主人様。Welcome to the night cafe.
So Republicans didn't want immigrants to vote, and they didn't want prisoners to vote. Their next target, registered voters. It's been almost 4 years of red hat, they done stole the election jokes, and I won't be adding anything to that conversation. I'm not trying to be as ableist, but not enough registered voters picked Trump in 2020, and having lost, Trump had this to say at a rally.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
And then he tries to take it back, of course, but he's lying if you just peek behind the curtain. Since 2020, 425 bills for restricting voter access have been written by Republican legislators, and so far, 33 have passed, enough to have an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to their effort to stop people from voting, which they say is to prevent election fraud, which, again, has never been proven, so what could they possibly be doing it for? There is a statistic that's essential to every election: voter turnout. It's divided into 3 categories of voter: low, mid, and high propensity. It's pretty self-explanatory. Low propensity are people who vaguely know who the president is and at most vote in every other general election. Mid-propensity voters are more interested in the news and mostly only vote in the general elections. And high-propensity voters are those who are invested in politics and have been for a long time and vote in both primary and midterm elections. It's the difference between someone who knows fantasy football is just glorified gambling, someone who knows their lineup by heart, and the guy who knows how many sperm cells Aaron Rodgers has left in his nutsack based on his time to throw. Those 425 bills also have the history of Republicans taking away voting rights behind it, like the Supreme Court's 2013 decision in Shelby County v. Holder. What this ruling changed was before, states had to get the approval of the Justice Department when they wanted to change laws about voting, and this prevented a gross undermining of the Civil Rights Act. After the decision, states no longer had to get that approval, and Republicans used this to their advantage because in the 2016 election, 816 voting stations were shut down, some in southern swing states that decided the election. Further evidence from the Brennan Center for Justice suggests that there was a targeted effort to reduce voter turnout in African American and Latino districts, 2 voter blocks that tended to vote blue. Since 2020, the limited data we have has shown that districts see lower voter turnout on election day, where there have been efforts to reduce mail-in and early voting, ballot drop boxes, etc., but those alternatives, such as absentee ballots, exist so that people can still exercise their right to vote when they can't physically go in to vote. And when you take away these alternatives with laws that Republicans passed for the sake of election fraud that never existed, the general population doesn't find the time to vote. Then there's restrictions on voter identification, and any conservative will talk your ear off about how voter ID prevents election fraud, and yet there still has been no evidence that proves any 2020 election fraud, not counting attempted voter fraud.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Voter ID laws vary from state to state. Here's a map, and the requirement of proper identification to vote has mostly bipartisan support, but Republicans as a whole support strict photo ID laws because it's another hurdle to make the voting process more difficult under the guise of preventing illegal immigrants from voting. And yet, if anyone watched the Elon Trump rally in Butler, which had everybody itching to make the same joke that would end up with federal agents at their residence, they kept emphasizing,
vote, vote, vote. Fight, fight, fight. Vote, vote, vote.
Thank you.
when it's evidenced, they don't want people to vote. They don't want to give Elon a shirt that fits either. I don't care about the disgust Trump clearly has towards this freak. Just, your shirt shouldn't do that. Even if you only get 6 inches off the ground, just put that thing away. The upcoming election is, like every election before it, the most important election of our lives. But especially for the Republican Party, because attempting a return to normalcy when your constituency is now known for believing vaccines make you go, will be a hilarious thing to watch unfold if Trump loses. Yet the stakes wouldn't be so high if the Kamala campaign wasn't so fucking dog shit as it has been since the debate. She's become so conservative that a secure border is bipartisan, the way to fix inflation is small business owners and an opportunity economy now, and Killer Kamala wants to continue the genocide in Gaza to try to prove to the undecided voter, look, I can be just as psychotically murderous as Trump, just look at how Israel's defended itself under Biden. I'll do that too. I will continue that. I'm just like him. Like, did she forget how she became the candidate in the first place? It's because of Biden's approval ratings being through the floor, but why exactly do you want to be just like him? I agree his skin looks very wearable, but I don't think you should share his brain too. He's got cobwebs up there. Something the DNC did do more effectively than the Trump campaign was ride the wave of public opinion. Biden steps down, then Kamala becomes the candidate, and then they choose Tim Walz, who did a couch fucking joke about junior varsity JV Vance. All great, and her numbers in the polls soared. But when Trump almost got his shit rocked in Butler, what did his campaign do? They fumbled it, the polls remained stagnant, and all they got was the next Kid Rock album cover. But after the DNC and the debate, the Dems have ran their campaign into a field in Pennsylvania, and here we are in October, and it's deadlocked 50-50 in the polls right now. And normally, historically, high turnout was good for Democrats. They won over most of the low-propensity voters, half of which were independent roadkill eaters. But polling since Biden won has shown that the tables have turned. Now if the Democrats want Kamala to win, they have to prevent as many low-propensity voters from casting their ballots because Trump is up an average of 5% in this demographic, and that could be a huge swing in a race that's this tight. But the Trump campaign has also managed to achieve what I believe to be the thing that'll win the election, and that is the astounding lead he has in young men compared to the Democrats. And this has been a trend, an investment since he became president in 2016. The way he's fostered a presence in young men, and it's coming to fruition during this election cycle because he's everywhere. Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, Nelk Boys, Aiden Ross. His name among that audience has a grasp that Democrats could only dream of. And this subsect, this voting bloc, could have a very stark impact on this election and in future elections. But for this November, if enough listeners of right-wing podcasts send in their very first ballots, it might be enough to beat the Democrats. Don't you see it? I see a swath a pride, a murder of crypto bros and young LA clones looking up how to vote in their district, finally deciding they're ready to participate in democracy after watching every conspiracy YouTube video possible, and having a little trouble finding a time or a place to vote for Donald Trump in between workouts. Turns out, their district's voting laws were changed by a Republican-backed bill that makes it just a little more difficult to convince enough former tater tots to vote for Trump. I think it'd be really funny if the Trump campaign lost due to him being a sore loser about losing in 2020, but if enough attention is garnered to the election for low and mid-propensity voters to show up, then I think he goes into the rafters with Grover Cleveland. It doesn't matter who I'm voting for, the state that I'm voting from isn't a swing state, but even if I did live in a swing state, I think it's important for me, as someone making this video about politics, to be open about who I vote for. I've got nothing to hide. I've made enough jokes about Trump, and I definitely think the Kamala campaign is driving off a cliff, but foreign policy has always had the support of both parties. America must maintain military dominance at all costs, and I think it's morally reprehensible for our tax dollars to fund a near $1 trillion military budget and our 800 military bases across the globe. We live in the time of a dying empire, and it's clearly shown through the promise of the popular and Haley Welch's timeless folly, and the subsequent controversy of her refusal to Hey y'all, so I gave myself a deadline for this video because it's a video about the election and I needed to get it out before the election. As far as who I voted for, I wrote in Free Palestine, and Kamala's being a crazy person about it, so fuck it. It's not even gonna matter anyways. Okay, peace.